Okay, welcome to the question and answering section on landlording. Now, an interesting thing about watching this and answering a lot of and knowing a lot of questions on landlording and answers is it's the second side of a coin. Once you know about landlording, you know about renting. And not everyone is going to be a landlord, although surprisingly, many people will rent out a room in their house or have a small property that they rent out. It is still, in my opinion, one of the best ways to supplement income and take whatever economic status one may find themselves on and nudge it up to the next sub-level. It is an amazing opportunity that people still have. However, not everyone's going to be doing landlording, but most people, and especially if they are younger, will experience renting. So, if you know about landlording, you will inevitably know something about being a good renter. And the renting world involves, think about it, probably the most amount of money you're going to spend on anything per year, and it involves your living situation. And it's regulated by both federal and state laws. It is a legal agreement that you enter into. I can think of almost nothing more, I don't want to say complicated, but more important and essential to know about than knowing about renting. So with that being said, let me give a recommendation. My no argument recommendation is you must know how to be a good renter and your rights and your responsibilities before you rent. Going into something so important without knowledge is foolhardy. Setting yourself up for problems, and good luck with that. My you don't have to take recommendation, and I don't do this very much at all, but I will for this, is a specific book. This book is Every Tenant's Legal Guide from the Corporation of Nolo. This was part of the suite of books, all from Nolo, that I used years ago to learn about landlording. Not the basics, not even the intermediates, but also up to the advanced. And learning about landlording also learns about tenants. And there's no one who should start landlording without reading a tenant's guide. They're one in the same coin. While reading it, I had realized, gosh, I wish I knew this when I was renting, for indeed I would have been a better renter. Nothing majorly went wrong, but it could have been better. So it is Every Tenant's Legal Guide. And I know we're in the lesson of landlording, but you cannot be a good landlord unless you know how to be a tenant, and unless you know the tenant's legal guide. Reasonably priced, personally used, and I have not found anything better. Every Tenant's Legal Guide, highly recommended. Okay, question. Could buying a cheap house that needs some work done to it and then selling it when you've made the repairs be worth it in the short term, or would it depend on the area? Well, everything is always going to depend on the area and the financials, okay? So that part of the question, always a yes, it depends on the area. Would it be worth it? Short answer, yes. And now I shall go into the long answer. There's three different ways to be in real estate. There's more than three, but here are the three biggest that you might encounter. One could be an active landlord. That is where you have owned the property, taken a mortgage on the property, you rent it out, you probably do the repairs yourself, you are an active landlord. You collect all the rent, you get there you go. You pay the taxes. That's usually what we think of with small-time landlords, where they have 1, 2, 4 properties. And it's usually how they're able to make money on it. Now, there are passive investors in real estate. And this is where you can just invest your money in companies that do real estate and are landlords. And that is the only thing you do is invest your money in other companies. You could also be a passive landlord where, yes, you buy the properties and you figured out a way to hire a company to manage it for you. Okay? This is a little tougher because that company that manages it, that does all the work and charges you for it, is going to charge money. Okay? But you're not the active manager of that whole situation. And then finally, in real estate, there's the house flippers. You've seen this most likely on TV. You buy a house, you fix it up, you sell a house. That is a way to make money. It is something you're going to have to learn, and you will spend time on it. It is basically entirely different from active landlording. Okay, you are in competition with companies that do it. Companies do this, especially half construction companies, half real estate companies. In our area, there's one or two specific companies that's all they do. And see, what they can do is they can snatch up a lot of the good deals because they do it really cheaply, because it is short term. Every single month that you keep the property, you've already paid for the property, you're losing money there, you're losing the taxes. It is doable, but you got to make sure that you are set up to put in the time and put in the effort. Remember, and it's much better when you can do the work yourself, because you have the experience and the licenses to do it yourself. So every time you hire someone to sand and redo the wood floors, that's money that that's coming out of your profits. So the more you have to hire people to do the work, the less profit you get. You are going to spend in a lot of time. That being said, if you're stable, if you know what you're doing, there is money to be made, but you will be working. It's not as simple as they show it on TV. You will be working. So there's no free ride in that. But it is called a house flipping, and it is entirely done. I'm not going to say it's not. And there are often good deals about houses that do need quite a bit of work. But once again, you have to know what you're looking for, what you're doing. It can go wrong very quickly, and it can go right very quickly too. Okay. Is buying a house and renting it out a better investment than stocks, ETFs, or other assets with the same liquidity? Okay, take a second to see what I'm going to focus in on here. In the financial world, well, we'll get to that. First off, definition: liquidity, able to get your investment into cash. So if you have invested in something, like you bought a house, liquidity is how fast you can get it into cash. If it's liquid, you can get it into cash immediately. So the first thing with the question is, landlording is not the same liquidity as stocks and ETFs. If you own a stock, you can get it to cash virtually immediately within a couple days. ETFs are basically the same as stocks, basically. They have very good liquidity. When you buy your own home and you're living in it, and you bought it, or if you bought a rental property and you're renting it, getting it to cash is going to take at least 2 to 3 months. It doesn't have the same liquidity, okay? So let's correct that first. Next, if you guessed it, I'm going to focus on the word better. Think about it. If there were a best thing to do with your money, everyone would do it. So why, if stocks and ETFs were better than landlording and owning property, why would anyone own property? If owning property were better than stocks and ETF, why do so many people invest in stocks and ETFs? The difference is it's not better, it's different. And it's different enough and similar enough in returns to make it worthwhile for some people who have different life situations. Because your life determines what you want to invest in, how much time you have, what your skills are. So it is not better. It is similar enough to be comparable enough, but different enough to make it better for some people. And the simple answer is do it all. It's called diversification. Don't have all your investments in one thing. You don't need to have all your money in the stock market. And stocks, when I'm saying stocks is I mean companies. Okay? You don't have to have all your investment money in properties that you run. There are many different ways to invest money in companies, at the same time investing it in real estate, because you can see how companies in real estate renting is different, right? You can also have money in other countries. What you do is you spread your money around, so no one full crash can hurt you. So even if you don't want to be a landlord, there's other ways to invest your money in companies that landlord themselves. So what I'm saying is, personally landlording is a small subset for a few people in a certain areas of the country. It happens to be an excellent idea in the area that I'm in. And it's also not for everybody. You have to read a stack of books 2 feet tall. You have to be able to do some of the repairs on your own. These are things that you have to take into consideration. It's not better. It's just different. Okay, so I like this one. What are the responsibilities of being a landlord? Well, if you are a hands-off landlord, where you just basically purchase a property, pay to have it repaired good enough for people to be in, and then your responsibility is hiring a good management company and then writing the checks when the management company says we need to do this, 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 this. Okay, there are management companies that will take care of everything for you. You will still write those checks, but you would have to. So your main job is to hire a good management company. Now, if you are a hands-on landlord, which makes more money, depending on scale, if you have many units, you're going to have to hire a management company. But if you're a small-time landlord, pretty much the only way to make it work is to be hands-on, you doing all the stuff, because it saves you the money. So, most small-time landlords are hands-on. And I like this question because I think your responsibility is not to make as much money as possible, even though there are those landlords out there, and I understand it. It's capitalism. It provides very, very, very cheap rent for people. But I'm not going to say it ruins it. But what it doesn't provide is safe and good property for families and people. Okay. So if you think your only job is to get money and have money every single month, there are landlords out there that will let the property run down. They will get money every month. It's more money than they pay on the loan for the property, and they let the property run down. The tenants live in unsafe conditions. It's really, in my mind, an awful thing. It does allow for very cheap housing, but it doesn't fit with my greatest responsibility, is to provide a safe and good property for people. It's the most important thing in their life almost all the time, is having a place to live, and that making it safe and good for them is how I believe landlording should be run. Secondly on that is to make, obviously, money. You have to make money to keep it going, but the primary responsibility is I don't think about how much money I'm making every month. I know it's enough. My primary thing is how can I make this property safe and a good experience for the people living in it. Second responsibility for landlording is finding good tenants. The better your tenant is, the better it is for your business. So sometimes this comes down to luck. Sometimes this comes down to a time-taking interview process with applications. It comes down to learning how to do it well. That's a responsibility of being a good landlord. I also think a responsibility is to know the laws and the rights of tenants and to follow them, and to know the laws and the rights of landlords and to follow them, to protect everybody's rights. We are in a business, and that business is regulated by the force of law in the state you're in and the federal government. So know the laws and follow the laws. And finally, the biggest day-to-day, the biggest week-to-week thing that you would have to do is just keep up on your repairs and your upkeep. So there's the first initial time when you buy a property, you have to go through and you have to do all the repairs that you think are necessary. And the more you can do before you rent it out, the less headache you'll have while you're actually renting it out. Okay, so if you take a full month or sometimes even 2, totally making that property perfect in your own mind, making sure there's no surprises. Once it gets going, there's a lot less to deal with. But you'll always get repairs and upkeep, and the furnace will always go out, and it'll always be the coldest night, and it'll always be 3 a.m. or something like that. It's never noon on your vacation when you get a call that says something's wrong. Okay, so you have to be on call basically 24/7 for emergencies. You can definitely take vacations, but you have to set it up so if there's a problem, you have someone covering. So you're basically on call all the time. But a well-kept property has very, very few emergencies per year. And just make sure you inspect that property every single year. Make sure things are running well. That's your That's your responsibility. Those are your 3-4 biggest responsibilities of being a landlord. Oh, and if things go wrong, it's responsible for you to fix the situation, whether it's court situation, if things go really wrong with tenants, if they destroy your property, it's up to you to fix it. You've got to understand sometimes it's going to go bad. And so your responsibility is to be someone who can look at the bad, walk through the bad, and make it better, because there will be the bad. Okay. I like this question because it also flips over to the renting side and how to be a good applicant for renting. If you were to buy a 2-family and rent it out, what is the best way to go about finding a tenant? What are red flags you should look for in one? Now, this is an excellent question because I'll tell you why. Your experience with landlording will result in absolutely one thing: your tenants. If they are amazing, your experience will be perfect. If they are less than amazing, your experience will be one of increasing trouble. So, first and foremost, the housing field of jobs is regulated by federal and state anti-discrimination laws. So your number one job in finding tenants is to make sure you obey all federal and state housing anti-discrimination laws. In general, you cannot discriminate based on protected class when renting to tenants. Now, that's the in general. You can absolutely never go wrong following that in general because there's nothing to get you in trouble. If you know all the protected classes of federal and state anti-discrimination laws, then you absolutely know how not to discriminate based on those classes. So now, that's how you know you stay out of all trouble. There are smaller other little things where the anti-discrimination laws don't necessarily apply, because I can't tell you that there aren't some considerations, and especially because the question asked, and I think I'm assuming the question is, if you were to buy a 2-family, live in half of it and rent out the other half. If you are renting out a room in your house, or if you are living in the house, like one side of the house or one floor, and you're renting out the other, there are differences in the discrimination laws rather than if you are living off the property. There's even differences in if you hire a realtor to advertise it or not. So you can never go wrong about not discriminating. But if you live in the house, check your local, state, and federal rules. You may be more picky about who lives with you. And the reason of that is because they're actually living with you in the same structure as opposed to you just being a business owner of the business. Okay? So depending on what you meant by the question, you have to go into whether you are violating or not violating discrimination laws. Now, to rent out, you could hire a real estate agent. They will go through a lot. They will go through the advertising. They will go through checking references and collecting applications. They are going to charge you 1 month's worth of your rent, which comes out to be not a lot if whom they find stays for years and years and years. But if the people they find only stay for a year, it becomes very, very expensive to use a real estate agent. But it means you don't have to learn the process and you don't have to do as much work. Now, if you want to find someone yourself, there's websites that deal with buying and renting houses. As of now, Zillow and Trulia come to mind. They show maps. They show what's for rent. You can easily put your property up on one of these websites, and it comes up, and many people use, especially out-of-town people coming into the town, use these sites. Also, currently, Craigslist is a site. You will get a lot of people emailing you about your listing on Craigslist. It doesn't necessarily, I found a lot of people tend to respond very, very quickly, but not necessarily a lot of follow-ups. But it definitely, local Craigslist is a way to get that out. One of the good ways to do it is just to link over to your pictures and stuff on Zillow. If you are joined on a Facebook group, a local, your local, let's say, city Facebook group, something like that, I find that at least once a month, someone's looking for a place to rent on that local Facebook group, and at least a couple times a month, people put out advertisements of, I have this place to rent. So if you've got local Facebook groups, that's a good way to go. And do not underestimate the humble little yard sign. there's the house, there's a sign that says for rent. Bingo. We rented out one of our places. I said, how'd you hear about us? Did you see it on Zillow? Did you see about the open house? They said, no. I drove by and I saw the open house sign, so I came in. Worked out well. All right. What are some red flags you should look in a tenant? Okay, so this is a great question because it also tells you how to be a good applicant and a good tenant. Okay, so red flags, low credit score. The reason for a low credit score is because someone has either never borrowed money or they have failed to pay back their debts. And if someone has failed to pay back their debt in the past, there's a higher probability that they won't pay their debt to you because renting is a debt. It's a month-to-month debt. And I get it. There are plenty of stories out there and plenty of individual situations. Feel free, if there's a low credit score, to talk to the applicant and find out why there's a low credit score, if you care enough to go into the individual situations. Otherwise, you play the averages and just go with high credit score. Job, good job, okay? So steady job with pay, with high pay. When I say high pay, I mean the rent should never be more than like 30% of their pay, because otherwise it's too much percentage of their monthly pay and it's going to be tough to make. So a job that pays enough to afford the rent, and the job should be stable, and you have a right to call their employers for a recommendation. And I'll tell you what, people on the phone have a lot of trouble lying often. For example, always call their previous landlord. Always. Because if they are poor tenants, the previous landlord likes you more than them, and they don't want you to go through the same thing they went through. You would be incredibly surprised how candid previous landlords are. And to be fair, their people's bosses are because they take it seriously, so they will choose their words carefully to answer the questions to the best of their ability. So good references with a phone call, not just written down, with a phone call so you can ask questions. If legal, you could ask for a criminal history. If legal, you have to check your local areas, and that's if that's something you care about. And there is psychological warning signs. If you should meet with someone, or at least talk to them on the phone before signing the lease, okay? There is a personal relationship between landlord and tenant. So you should meet with them if you're a small-time landlord, okay? And when you meet with someone, do you get human psychological warning signs? And can you put a name to those warning signs? Because if you can't put a name to it, you have to be legal in your business decisions. But there are sometimes warning signs. But I urge you to be careful, because many humans have warning signs that are based in their life's prejudice. So be careful, because how you feel about someone, if it's based on prejudice, is not a good idea to make a business decision. If your warning sign is something that you can put a name to and it's not based on prejudice at all, then that could very well be a legal warning sign. You have to be able to name it, and it has to be a good business decision reason. Here's a good example of what I mean by psychological warning signs. When you need to interview a tenant, if they don't take it seriously like a job interview, that could be a warning sign. And that's a good business reason to have a red flag, because the lease is a legally binding contract, and if someone's meeting with you and they're not taking it seriously and acting like one would act in a job interview, then you have serious questions of whether they are taking it seriously. Or if during the interview isn't respecting you, or they're crossing boundaries, that would throw up red flags or warning signs. So that's something that could be taken seriously into consideration of how someone presents themselves and whether they're acting appropriately for the business relationship that they want to get into with you. All right, specific question time. Very specific. If someone wanted to have two houses, summer in New York and winter in Florida, Would it be more beneficial to rent one of those every year or to own both houses so you can live in one and rent the other depending on the time of year? Simple answer, I don't know. I literally don't know. I know people make it work, okay? I know Florida has worked this out. Florida is basically the New York Northeast retirement place, okay? They've done a lot of things, like from no income tax to certain housing things. Like, they figured it out, how to draw in older Northeasterners from where the winter is super cold, and they figured it out how to get down there. So much so that certain local banks in New York, certain local banks have just set up other branches in Florida. So you'll see like New York banks have their branches here in New York and in Florida, right? Because this is what Florida does. They figured it out, and it can definitely work. I just don't know how it works. One thing I would say is trouble finding renters, okay? I mean, maybe, but it's like, who's going to come in for 4 or 5 months in winter just for those 4 or 5 months? You see what I'm saying? In New York. And then who's going to, maybe you could own 2 properties and figure it out. I mean, I think you probably could. I think people own one and rent the other. I don't know. But capitalism is capitalism. Florida has made it so it works. And I'm interested to find out exactly what most of the people do that spend time, snowbirds? I forget what they're called. They spend half the 3/4 of the year one place, 1/4 or half or 33% in the other. It's a real thing. I just wonder how they make it work. Thanks for asking. All right, so is it worth it to buy a duplex home with the intent of renting it out if you are going to leave the area, like out of state? Or is it too much hassle money to manage? Great question. Usually it's a no-brainer to buy a duplex, live in it for a while, and then move locally and keep it rent out. When you buy a home, and it's your own home, so you bought it and lived in it, you get a very good mortgage rate on your mortgage, and so the mortgage is probably pretty cheap, according to current numbers, and you're in the area, and now you've just become a small-time landlord doing a lot of the stuff yourself, and it's very usually easy to make the money work. But what if you're going out of the area, like out of state? Well, I'll tell you this, if you're an hour away or you're out of state, it's virtually the same. You're not going to be doing it yourself, okay? You're not going to do repairs yourself. You're not going to be on call. You're going to have someone else. I guess if you're an hour away, that's okay. But if you're 2 hours away or you're out of state, you're not going to be actively managing it. So is it too much hassle or money? It can be done if the rents in the area are high enough. You need a good management company, okay? They have to, you have to trust them, and they can't charge you too much, and they have to contact everybody to do the repairs, find new tenants. They have to do it. You can find people to do this. You could definitely do it. In fact, a lot of real estate agents do this on the side. You need someone you can trust. And then you have to charge enough money to cover all costs, because as long as you're covering all your costs, theoretically, your house is appreciating in value and you can sell it later. You know, ideally, you would cover all your costs and get a little bit of money per month, and your house appreciates. So the thing is, it can be done as long as rent in the area is enough to cover all the costs and that management company. And I think they tend to charge a month worth of rent. You gotta do the research. But yeah, no, I think it's worthwhile if there's enough money coming in to make it worthwhile. But you certainly aren't going to be doing it yourself. You're too far away. All right, thanks for watching.